Come on in, friends, to the Mind Body Balance Strong as a Mother Coffee and Conversation series. I'm Laura Lawrence, educator, author, and mental wellness advocate. I started a coffee and conversation series a few years ago to bring together the yin energy of women, whether it be mothers, grandmothers, daughters, aunts, or best friends, to have real, authentic conversations about all things motherhood, marriage, and everything in between. It includes the connections and relationships in our lives. This edition, called Kids These Days, is a super special one, as I've invited our Canada's very own version of Brene Brown, Dr. Jody Carrington, to sit in the hot seat with me. Over the past 15 years, Dr. Jody Carrington has assessed, treated, educated, and empowered some of our most vulnerable and precious souls on the planet. She is a child psychologist by trade, but Jody rarely treats kids. The answer lies, she believes, in the people who hold them, especially when kids have experienced trauma. That's when they need big people the most. Her first book, Kids These Days, a game plan for connecting with those we teach, lead, and love, came out in 2019. It is now on Amazon's bestsellers list and has sold over 50,000 copies worldwide. Now help me welcome the one and only Dr. Jody Carrington. Such a pleasure to welcome a fellow prairie potty mouth. I found a girl who swears as much as me. A healer, holder of space, best-selling author, international game changer. Welcome to the Strong as a Mother Club, Dr. Jody.
Laura Lawrence, it is my honor and my privilege to sit with a strong mother tonight. I am so grateful that you asked me to do this. This is like perfect timing in so many ways, as it always is.
Well, we're going to have a phenomenal conversation. Before we get to it, though, I really want to start by just taking a moment to acknowledge that I am on Treaty 6 territory, home of the Cree, Saulteaux, Stoney, Nakota, and Dakota people.
Can I do that too?
Absolutely.
I'm on Treaty 7 land here in Alberta, which is home of the Blackfoot Confederacy, which is made up of the Siksika First Nation, the Tsuut'ina First Nation, Stoney Nakota First Nation, Métis Nation Region 3. And I am so honored to raise my babies where so much sacrifice was made.
Okay, so here we go. I'm going to take something that you said this morning on your lives. My God, I love those lives. But you said this morning, over preparing for things is a waste of time. Amen. I am sliding into home base here with this interview. And I did the teacher thing and over prepared. And then I thought, but Laura, you're not even being yourself. It's just be you know, just throw it out there, have some fun, have some laughs, and let's get her done.
Yes, that's how I roll, Laura.
That's how you roll. So I've had so many friends and clients share with me that your morning coffee chat lives that you started right at the start of this pandemic was literally a lifesaver for them. Like, no joke. It was their purpose to get out of bed in the morning, pour themselves a coffee, and tune into someone who was bringing light and love in the middle of a shit storm where there was so much fear and anxiety. So I want to know, let's start off. I want to know what you've learned and how you've grown through this last year of showing up live for 65,000 people.
Okay, so first of all, I would say that I will always, for the rest of my career, do stuff virtually. And if you would have asked me as a psychologist, 18 months ago, you need to open up a piece of your practice that will always be virtual, that you need to have a component of events that will always be virtual, I would say no. Like, there's not a chance. Like, my whole platform is built on connection, the power of reconnection. I can't do that virtually. I don't want to start a therapeutic relationship virtually if there's any way. I mean, doing things virtually was just such like an accommodation we made for people who could just not possibly, for the love of all that was holy, because they were in the most remotest corner of like Inuvik. That was the only reason we would ever like telehealth something. Yeah. And I think what I've learned the most in this process is just how powerful and connecting this can be. And it was early in the pandemic where somebody said this, and I wish I knew who it was, but I can't remember. And they said, but don't ever forget, right? Mr. Rogers did all of his teaching online. And when I heard that, I was like, is it possible to create therapeutic engagement and change? Is it possible to create connection, therapy or online? Yes. And the issue is, I think we take it when it's the best we got. But I think right now, how does this exacerbate our continued connection with each other around the world? There are people and programs and courses and things that I've created in this pandemic that I would have never ever considered as even a thought on the radar. And now we launched a 4-part event series that I'll do for the rest of, like, as long as I'm able. And every one of them, even when we are able to be back in person, will always have a virtual component, because the accessibility to that, who are not mobile, for example, or people who, can't afford to come, or all of those things, the accessibility just is increasing significantly. Also, when you suffer from significant trauma responses, it becomes really difficult to brave being in the place of other people. There's a huge vulnerability of that. So if we can start to have those discussions and sort of shake some of that stuff loose in the comfort of your own home, let's do it, right? Like, I love all of the potential that is sort of brought to light for me.
When I was going through one of the hardest seasons of my life, I had a mentor say to me, which I probably wanted to punch her in the face at the time, uh, but
Then
she
you know it's
then you know it's good. She said to me, "Growth never comes from comfort zones." Let's talk a little bit about the pandemic before we get to talking about kids these days. I mean, in fashion of Strong as a Mother, Coffee and Conversation, I got to ask you some of the Strong as a Mother rite of passage questions. We're going to get right into it. Favorite quarantine pandemic snack? What is it?
okay. I've always been a massive fan of ice cream, and I cannot tell you just how much ice cream we have purchased in this house. I'm also acutely aware that over the last, 13 months, our children have grown exponentially, because we have a 10-year-old and an 8-year-old twins. We used to get ice cream as a treat, and it would last forever because it was just a little snack and like all this. Now we mull through that like you don't even know. And now I get really like bougie about my ice cream choices. Like, I look for things that are sale, but like we have like, there's this like ice cream company out of Ontario that like Sobeys must have a contract with, and like they're the coolest kinds of ice cream ever. So we have to try them all. And I don't know, like I have this thing against Ben and Jerry's or Haagen-Dazs, like in the little things, because it just feels like too rich and too decadent. I need the like fucking Ukrainian sized pails of like good shit, just so that you don't run out. And so we are trying all of the things all the time, and I just like, it's like just a little bit, it's fine, just a little bit. And I would think, like, before this pandemic, I mean, like, it was sacrilegious, of course, in my training days, or like when I'm really trying to be like fit and healthy. Like, you would never consider having like a chocolate bar a day. You would never consider like having ice cream every day. Guess what? It's not a day if I don't have me some ice cream on board. It's not a day.
So that brings me to my next question, because we ride the line at Strong as a Mother. Were you a casualty of the COVID-15 pound problem that I am hearing from so many women?
I would say I held my own. I would say that like there has certainly been minor fluctuations. In the beginning, I was so fucking busy that it was like, oh, okay, I'm okay with this. I'm okay with, like, because there was a lot of hearts that needed to be held. We were trying to figure out like how we navigated onto this virtual platform. So I was a lot of time at the office because we remained an essential service, so my practice stayed open. But there's so much navigating. So like I had a little bit of a head start. But I would say now, like, the COVID fatigue is setting in, and now I don't give a shit anymore.
We always end up talking about the men in our lives on the Strong as a Mother. I mean, because it's just fun, and we poke fun at them from time to time. But I want to know, what's your biggest pet peeve about your personal husband?
Okay, so that's an easy one. So I adore this guy. We didn't get married until I think we were 34 when we got married. He has a PhD in animal science. And so he's way more comfortable with cows than he is with people, generally speaking. And I don't know if I didn't recognize this. I knew he had allergies when we dated, and like I was very clear about the seasonal nature of them. I do not remember, for the first 2 years that we dated, the the nose blow honk. And I feel like that would have been a deal breaker. And I'm not sure, like, if it was hidden, if the honking was under wraps, because he knew how fucking asinine it was that he just didn't bring it out until we were married, or if I just loved him too dearly and I just saw through it. But I honestly do not remember. Like, I think had I woke up and our like 4th month into this relationship and he was like, hey, like taking a run at it, I would have been like, it's over. So that is the thing that I think, and I've tried many times to be like, okay, here's the thing. Do you hear anybody else like in the world honking like that? Do you? He's like, Jode, it's what I do. You know, it's what I do. It's a thing. I have to do it. I feel better. I'm like, oh, okay. So can we practice without that? Like, maybe can you go outside? Like, other things. It's the fucking worst. And I'm really in this phase now where I'm like, not gonna let it bother me. La, 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 la. Tim, I love him. 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 I can't.
So I want to know, does he leave cupboard doors open like my husband? It's like I'm Vanna White going into the kitchen. Like, I don't understand it. If my husband's the only man that leaves the damn doors open.
Well, they're busy. I don't know if you know them. They're busy. They have a lot of things on their mind. You know what I mean? So like, don't ask too much because there's a lot of things that are going on. So sometimes you're just busy and you can't shut cupboard doors.
Or when you go to make lunch for the kids in the morning and you go for their favorite snack and you reach in and the box is fucking empty because somebody, the husband, took the last one and left the box.
Stop.
Every time.
Unfair.
And then he bear punches into the box. That's how he gets in. It's a quick entry. Bear punch. He's gonna
unsealable from here on into the eternity of this package. Mm-hmm.
So I love your kids. I tune in the mornings, really hoping that they make an appearance. I love you, but your children, I am telling you, like little Liv, when, first of all, thank you so much for having her come on with the book, my children's book, Lily's Life.
I love it. Oh my God, we love it.
I was driving and a client texted me and said, you have got to get online right now. I pulled over, started watching, and started bawling my freaking eyes out when she was talking. Yes. That was the point of writing the book, is for another little girl to read my story and say, like, that's me.
I love it. Many times she's like, loudmouth, let's talk about that. And I was like, yeah, let's talk about it again and again and again. She adores it. And it's beautifully written. Illustrations are gorgeous. I love it.
Thank you. Thank you. And your oldest, Asher, right? Is it Asher?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
The milk sacks. Like,
did you hear the story this morning? So this guy is like way too smart for us. And I appreciate this. Like, I think there's been a lot of kids I've treated over the years that I knew in my head that if they could just grow into their brain, they'd be okay. But they have so much neural activity happening that they just can't keep up. And so it gets overwhelming. And of course your body turns into having an anxiety response. And he is the epitome of that. So he's got so many things firing that he's introspective and sensitive about it all. And so we'll come up with stupid shit like about the Greek gods and heaven and why, like, where was Joseph? Why was he not at the tomb? And I was like, fuck, I don't know. Like, if he's there the whole time and he's like in the manger, and then at the big time when Jesus is rising, why is Mary sitting outside the tomb by herself? I'm like, I don't know. I've never thought about that before. And then yesterday he was like, I came over to school. He's like, Mom, I'm gonna talk to you. And I was like, oh, okay. He's like, I almost perished from dysentery today. And I was like, what? From what? From dysentery. I said, I don't even know are you okay? And I said, what does that mean? He's like, and he looks around the kitchen because this is like a fucking top secret conversation now. When you poop yourself to death. And I was like, what? Okay, first of all, it's a thing, which I did not know. Second of all, how do you know this? He's like, well, because I Googled it. And I was like, did you shit yourself at school? Like, is that what happened? And then I'm immediately like, he's going to get fucking shunned for the rest of his day. Like, where's your pants? Like, is it still in your under? Like, are you one of the kids? Where, can I call Mrs. Morgan? I mean, you're in grade 5. I don't typically send a change of clothes for you, but like, this is where I'm going, right? I was like, no, mom, I made it. Like I had to get the key for the washer because of COVID. They want to be very careful about that. And I was like, holy Christ. And so then, he's like, no, I made it, but I was just really concerned because mom, like you wouldn't believe, I was like, you know what, time out. I don't know that we need to go there, but I just want to know, like, are you okay? Like, how does he's like, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I have, every time I listen to you tell stories about him, that's our 6-year-old. And exactly what you said, like, it's going to take a while for him to grow into his brain because it's so busy. And the things he thinks about at night, I'm like, where are you? But I really want to know, because every morning I'm waiting for some kid story, but name one thing your kids do that make you lose your mind, flip your lid the fastest. Because I think you got your shit together pretty good as a
No,
psychologist.
no, no, you're wrong. I would say it's interesting. It's not all of them. I know without a doubt I'm much more triggered by our daughter than our sons. She's also really quick to like throw it right back to me. And so any sort of disrespect, over the top, sort of like drop to my knees, this is the worst thing that's ever happened, I just like I cannot deal. And I think so much of it, and I'll tell you, like I've even talked about this with my therapist extensively, is that I was always told as a kid that I'm too much. And so when she gets into that too much stage, I feel it all over again. And I'm really quick to try to fix it. I have very little space to be like, oh, okay. Now, when Evan, her twin, goes over the top, I mean, he did this today just before I jumped on here. He bumped his head and he got a big goose egg on the top of his head. And I was like, okay, okay, okay. And then, oh, it was awful. And I told him I had a meeting in the morning and I had a meeting tonight. And he was like, just melting down. And I just sat in the chair and I was like, okay, I know it's hard. With Liv, I would have been like, oh, this is ridiculous. Okay. You were fine, sweetheart. I always add that in there just like for a little mothering approach, And I just noticed that I show up differently for both of them. And I think that's really it's so true for all of us. And I don't think we give ourselves enough grace in that regard, right? Because at different seasons in our lives, our kids will remind us of different parts of us. And if sometimes we're not even aware of it until we see us in them. And it's not about just being their mother, it's about how we show up as their mother at different stages. Because I thought I was going to be the best baby mom. Like I was the like superstar babysitter in Viking, Alberta, Canada. I would like, you would want me as your babysitter. Like I would come with snacks and plans and shit. And like, I would like do all the things and I couldn't wait to be a mom. In fact, I like broke a relationship up that I was madly in love with this Newfoundlander because he was clear he didn't want kids. And I was like, this is going to bust my soul to the core, but I know I need to be a mom. And the second I became a mom, I wanted out. Like I did not love the baby side of things. And I thought I would be so good at it because I've always been good with like babies and little kids and all those things. When they were my own, I'm out. The older they get, the more I love them. And I think because I really like, this is probably the first sort of summer, winter where I was like, I didn't want to go on holidays without them. And it's really interesting because I think up until this point, I was like, thank you, Jesus. If we could get away for a week by ourselves, it was the best thing that ever happened to our marriage and us. And I could sleep in my own bed and I would sleep in and all those things. Now I don't want to go without them. Right? It's weird, right?
I'm not at that stage yet. Soon.
I know. Well, it's just like because they're so fun now. And I think they're so independent. And I'm not worried every 2 seconds. And again, that might be different for somebody else, right? There's so many people. Like I think about my Marty. She was such a baby mom. And she would like, she just never wanted them to grow up. She loved every second. She would, wear them and hang, just all day, just be with them. And now the older they get, she's like, I miss that stage. And I was like, fuck that. Like the second I got to give away my car seats, like it was like a bra burning festival in my front yard. And it's just because we all have a different story about our competencies and where we feel most comfortable and what we felt like in those stages of our own lives, right? That really contribute to how we show up and where we're at with our partners, who they look like, who they sound like, who they smell like. All of those things affect the way that we show up for them.
Well, and for me, as we were chatting before we went live here, is, I am a parent and a co-parent. And so I feel like I have different phases of parenting. And I really experience a lot of guilt that I wasn't the parent for my two eldest at that time that I am now for my two littlest, because I've done a shit ton of work the last 5 years. I love what you just said about the different seasons of being a mother and how it changes. I mean, we all have a child who triggers us the quickest. It's he or she is our mirror. Yesterday, mine told me, he sat down, looked me straight in the eye, like straight in the eye, and said, "You want to know what people call people like you?" And I said, "What?" "Party pooper." "Do you want to know another word for that, Mom?" "Fun sponge. All my friends call you that." There you go.
Tuck that in your bra, Mom.
He has no problem calling me. And then he heard me talking about it on a live. And then he says, what a wise little turd. He says, "Did I give you permission to talk about me? Did I tell you I wanted you to talk about me? Do you know that's a little embarrassing?" And I mean, the kid's right?
Not wrong. Yeah.
Not wrong. He's not wrong. So I have a 3-year-old, a 6-year-old, an 11-year-old, and a 15-year-old. So during lockdown, I had the two most difficult stages of parenthood, the toddler and the teenager. And I am not a stay-at-home mother, and I am not a let homeschooling teacher. And I am a mother and a teacher. So that's a problem. So
And no, I'm not. I am to your children. I will mother your children and teach your children all day long. I will do neither of my own when I don't get a break. Okay? So let's just be clear about that. You know what I really love about that term, actually, when you said that, is because I just wrote a speech for Together, which a talk for Together, which we do on May 8th. And it just occurred to me, like during this talk, as I was talking about mothering and what that really looks like. And of course, the definition of like, caring, providing affection for, and sort of bringing up. And you actually don't need to be a woman to mother. It's this, the skill that so many of us have and desire to have. And it was remarkable to me to think about this, which, I mean, maybe this isn't an epiphany to anybody else, but like everybody has a mother, but no, not one of us is born a mother. You become one. And that was the most remarkable insight that I don't like when I was writing it, because I was thinking my mom, her firstborn was adopted by this beautiful family. And so she's my full biological sister. And we didn't know about her till I was in my 30s, because that's when she found us. And I was thinking about the power of being a mother and mothering. Sometimes the strongest things we do as mothers is step aside or step in or step up or step in as a step parent or back up while we let a step parent step in. Like, holy shit, right? All of those things really is the definition of mothering. And sometimes it is even allowing, our partners, whatever that looks like, to be the mother, to do the mothering in those moments, right? Because none of us are born one. We become them. And if we allow our partners to become them, then there is these all hands on deck. And if you have, this fantastic co-parenting relationship, and fantastic is a loose term, but you have a co-parenting relationship, all of the mothering that is potentially there for these tiny humans is just, it sets my soul on fire.
I never thought of it that way. So my husband is a stepdad to my two oldest children. And often when I'm really struggling, and I know better, I mean, I've studied this work, I'm in it, but when you're triggered, and you've said it before, I've heard you say it so many times, it can be such a good person to other people's children, but when you've got the biggest stake, you just lose your freaking mind the fastest.
Yeah. We're so much better with other people's children. And you've probably heard me say this too. Like, I wrote a book called Kids These Days. And if you watch me with my own kids on many occasions, you wouldn't buy the fucking book. Right? Because it's like, it is so much easier to tell people how to do it. And then in the moment, and I know when I'm screaming at her or grabbing her arm and saying like, "I am not listening to you until you can use your words." Fuck. Like, I can barely get mine out, which means she has no capacity to get hers out. I am being completely offside because she's a tiny human who needs some calm in the chaos, and I am just contributing to it. If I watched me from the window, I'd be like, okay, big person. What we're going to do here is we're going to move you to a safe place, okay? And I know those things, but in the moment, this is the whole point around emotional dysregulation. It's why it takes a village to mother children into greatness is because none of us, not one of us, can do it alone.
No, and what I really love about your book, which I have to say is one of the most brilliant books I've ever read as a mother and an educator, and the best narrated audiobook ever. Honest, I
Uh,
hate audiobooks. I hate audiobooks, but it was like having you right in the co-pilot seat of my car, and I listened to it quick. But some of my favorite, I mean, everybody's just got to read it, and I've been telling all my followers, all my clients, all my friends, but there are three big takeaways that I took from your book that really were game changers. First of all, the connection before redirection. And I said to my husband when we both kind of lose it and we start yelling, or I said to him, they're not going to listen. Like, they're not going to listen if they're not feeling connected.
that's a Gordon Neufieldism. He said this: collect before you direct. And he's a Canadian psychologist out of Vancouver. He wrote a book with Gabor Mate, actually. And he's phenomenal. Collect and then you direct. And it's the hardest thing to do, right? Because your husband also needs to be collected in that moment. You need to be collected in that moment. And if everybody is in this direction mode, this is where trouble comes, right? Is because we're all dysregulated. We need somebody, and sometimes it means space. Sometimes it needs a break. And then it's like, because you know what it feels like. You take it, you go to the bathroom and you're in there and you're like, and then at least somebody gets their lid back on and you can come in and be like, okay, everybody, let's have a snack and talk about it, or whatever the deal is, right? But oftentimes when you stay in that moment, it becomes really hard to get regulated because he's telling you what to do. Are you fucking kidding me? Does he know who you are? And then he's like, you're telling me what to do? Listen, these are my kids too. Like, are we in this together or not? You're going to be the boss of everything? How much? And this is the conversation Aaron and I have all the time. You think you know everything about how to parent these kids? Is that what you really think right now? Yeah, I do actually. Right? And and then we get into this standoff and nobody wins. And the kids are like, wow, like,
Well, I like what you said about space, because when you talk about, getting the lid flipped back on, and I'm a science teacher, and so I just gobbled that part up about, the function of the brain, the physiology. I love the visual, and I use that now when I teach my mindfulness for kids workshops virtually, when I'm going into schools, and I credit you and I say, like Dr. Jody says, and that flip the lid, it's a game. I mean, I've had college students sit in some of my workshops and go, Laura, I never realized that I can't actually control it at that point.
yeah, right.
So,
Yeah.
so that talk about how do we get our lid flipped back on? And for a lot of us, for me, it's space. I need space. My daughter needs space, but guess what? I want to smother her. I want to fix it.
Yeah. Most of the time we do. And the more you mean to me, the more inclined I am to fix it. The more invested I am in our relationship. I mean, if we're in our, you and I go for coffee and, we have this disagreement and I barely even know you. I'm like, okay. Like, call me back if you feel like you want to chat again. If we've been best friends for 40 years and you storm out of a coffee date with me, I'm busted. Right? Like, what do you mean you're never talking? Whoa, 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 whoa. And so I'm like chasing you down the street. I'm like, don't leave, Laura, what is happening? I want to figure it out. Right. There's the aggressiveness around like, come on back to me. Yeah. And sometimes it is really that idea of, I need to be in a place where I can help you. You need to be a place. Part of our biggest concern about the disconnect is that we won't come back. Right? It's that abandonment fear. And if you matter so much to me and we get abandoned in this process, or if I have a history of abandonment, I'm going to chase even more. And women tend to do this more than men, right? Because we actually have more skill in this repairing phase than men do. They just run. So if I look at fight, flight, or freeze, typically, right, we want to be in the fight. We want to use our words. We want to get emotionally like, let's clarify this so we can regulate. The other opposite side of it, typically how men respond is they run first, regulate, and then if they have the skill, come back. But you can see how those opposing ways of dealing with the world often result in, the finest marital therapy. And even Sue Johnson, a Canadian psychologist, developed a program, a marital therapy sort of theory around emotion-focused therapy. And she really talks about the dance that happens in marriages where it's often a fight and a flight response, that you're chasing each other around this sort of dance that you do. And it's enough about how can we slow down enough so that each other feels seen, and then it slows down, right?
Wow. And that reminds me of the second profound thing I took from your book that I have used on the daily with my kids when they're blowing up is tell me more. Tell me about that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Whoa. Powerful. And the other day, my daughter broke her ankle, which doesn't sound like a big thing, but after a year of a pandemic, when you have missed out and you were a competitive elite athlete and you've missed out on all your sports, and you're looking forward to nationals this summer, and you have made the provincial team and you break your ankle, it's a big deal, right? So she's been having a hard time process it. And I'm patient. And finally the other day I came back from a day at work, listening to stories, hard stories of people growing through hard things. And I just said to her, like, you are not paralyzed. It is just a broken ankle. And then I realized after I said that, I did not see her. I did not hear her. I did not acknowledge her.
Yeah, and you're exhausted, so you get to have a pass on that one as well. But the fact that you even recognize that is critical, right? Because I mean, it's actually not the that you said it part that's the hardest part. What's so beautiful about that is that you were like, "Whoa, time off, time out. Let's come on back to me." And the lesson was much more powerful in the coming back to it than it was in even if you got it right the first place.
And pandemic parenting has been hard for so many people. It doesn't matter what age your kids are. And
Yeah.
I heard you talk the other day in a podcast, about the teenage years. They're really struggling.
Yeah, I just have some really big concerns about, so many of us because we're all in a state as a globe in this sort of emotional dysregulation state. But I think part of my biggest concern for anybody, if I had to pick one, would be adolescents, 14 to 19 kind of in this phase, because there is this necessary phase of independence that requires a going away from. So Bowlby talked about that as, secure base and safe haven. And he really, this sort of phase of secure base where kids sort of leap off and try shit and, try the weed pen and push what do you call those things when you're supposed to come back on time? Curfews. Just a little stroke there. When they push the curfews and they're like doing all those things, that's their job, 14 to 19. And they learn sort of how to then navigate the safety around that. Nope, back here. I got a broken heart. I got to do that. And you often aren't doing that sort of in your mom's basement 99% of the time. You're figuring that out like on the schoolyard or, when you all go away with the girls and have sleepovers in somebody's tent in some back 40, like you figure those things out. And all of those opportunities to navigate those things have been, suspended temporarily, albeit, but in some really important developmental years. And I think what we just have to recognize, I mean, we can overcome it, but we recognize the fact that this will be life altering for so many of these babies because perception is a function of experience. And when you're 16 years old and you can't go on the Sweet 16 when you were supposed to be able to, all camp together for 2 nights and, you get 2 vodka seltzers, this is devastating. It's devastating. And so, and it's time you don't get back. I mean, I see a lot of kids, really sort of planning their university departures and what that was supposed to look like and, their big sport opportunities. And in and of itself, in the grand scheme of things, people are dying and on, intubated in this moment. And it's hard sometimes for us to compare that. But of course, perception is a function of experience. And so for these guys who are 16, this is intubation level. This is the most devastating thing to this point that has occurred to them. Right. And so we have the context of, people are on intubation or people are paralyzed or people are, out in this big world and have had many, like, just buckle up. If you think this is bad, you just wait. Right. But they don't know that yet. So it's like their perception is really a function of just what they know to be true.
How do we come back from this? We are grieving, as as a globe, we are grieving the loss of so many patterns. And how do we repair this? How do we reconnect?
Okay, so what I know for sure is that it is not the responsibility of any one person. If we depend on a government official to, mandate something or reopen things, or if we think a senior leader or a superintendent or whatever is going to direct us to greatness, we're wrong. I think really what we see, and even in the world of, social justice work or reintegrating a society that has been, under lockdown, which is, we're not new to this. This has happened before. It's like, it is the responsibility of each one of us because we are all just here walking each other home. And when you look to somebody else, if you're the one rolling your eyes at the staff meeting because, the senior leader's not doing this or they're not endorsing this much money, you're the problem. because our job is, again, in a safe way. Even if, we have a shutdown or, all of these things, our schools are still in big trouble because we're not even talking about vaccines in kids. So we will still be up against school closure significantly, I would say, for another year, right? And so the deal is then, what does that mean in your community? It means, how do you, to the best of your capacity, whatever you have left, are you waving at your neighbor? Are you buying coffee carts? Are you taking snacks to the kids' school and in a COVID friendly way? Are you, getting your kids sidewalk chalk and writing notes all over the sidewalk in front of the teacher's door so they can come in? Are you dropping notes? Like I did this last week to the RCMP detachment here, just wrote a note and tucked it under, I don't know whose car it is because I don't know any of the guys who are posted here right now or the folks that are posted here. But I just tucked it under one piece in the windshield and just said, I don't know if you know this, but you're amazing. And I see all the sacrifice you make to keep this community safe. And I'm so grateful for you. Right? How do we do that? Because in that moment, there's an oxytocin burst, a decrease in cortisol, and this fella can continue to serve. How do I know he's not going to not come upon an accident scene with my son in 3 hours from now? Right? And so we're just walking each other home. This is not the responsibility of the police to get it right. Or, I mean, we have to do so much better, in terms of all of our institutions that are not well, because historically in education, in first responding, particularly policing, we haven't looked after the people who are doing the serving. And so when they're overwhelmed, exhausted, and burnt out, they're going to act like assholes. So the answer isn't to punish and further take away, which we've done historically in the school system or in the justice system. It is, how do we take a step back and say, what the fuck are we doing wrong, to prepare people to do the hard work of walking each other home? If you agree to be a police officer, if you agree to be a teacher, you are saying, I will hang on to people at their most dysregulated state. Okay. So if you're going to ask people to do that, then what are you doing for them? There's no support.
No, I totally agree with you. Even in the work that I do, I've always said the people I don't see enough of are the first responders, police officers, EMTs, people who are working frontline trauma. Who is holding them? Who is holding space for them? Yeah.
Nobody. And there's no programs for first responder spouses, not one in North America. Very little is done for the families of teachers. Unless you are, married to a teacher, you're very disconnected from the teacher family. Right? You got to come to the Christmas party and you feel like really ridiculous because everybody got their things, but there's no support or understanding about just what it means to be an educator holding other people's children. And certainly in the world of first responding, which I think it's even more necessary, is to talk about what trauma looks like, is to talk about what it looks like when you've, been on an accident scene that will probably result in no sleeping for 6 weeks. And, what does that mean and how can you help? And more importantly, how can you not help? Right? Because I think there's a lot of things that we tend to do, which is like, you're fine. Come on. Do you not love us? Right? And that's not what it's about.
No, not at all. And I believe that if we want to start working towards supporting mental health initiatives, we really do need to start looking at the people who are on those front lines, who need that support. So one of the other things I really wanted to talk about tonight, because Jace, it's very important to me, and you do it so well. You have brave, bold, vulnerable conversations about race, privilege, inclusivity, and how do we have those conversations with our children when, for many of us, we're still exploring our own white privilege and what that means and entails. And I know I had an opportunity to really explore that for myself when I started the Strong as a Mother series. A very good client and friend of mine messaged me a few months after, and she was so brave, and I commended her for it. She said, Laura, I just want to know, why is it only white women that are invited on the panel? And I went, what? And I had not even realized it, not because I meant to exclude other women, but it wasn't my goal to include them.
Yeah, it's what you know.
Mm-hmm. So I had to take a step back and say, this is a learning moment for me. And thank you for that. Thank you for that knowledge. And I will do better. I will go forward. So how do we have these conversations with our kids? Because I'm right in it. I mean, I'm having some of these conversations with my 11-year-old, my 6-year-old. How do you do it?
Well, I don't know. I'm so embarrassed because, the more I learn about just how privileged I am, the more sort of I am shocked at that I have lived, like I'm a 45-year-old woman and I am racist to the core of me. And it is the thing I think in my life that I am so embarrassed about. I mean, I grew up in small town Alberta, white, straight, able-bodied, privileged in every sense of the word. And like I never saw a person of color until I was in grade 3, from what I can remember. And what I knew about First Nation Indigenous reserves was you just drive fast because it wasn't safe. Yeah. And everything I would have heard about was negative, and they're just looking for handouts and all those things. And I truly, to the core of me, right, would always be like, okay, even as I developed a platform, yeah, I'll check the boxes, like for sure, right? Diversity is very important to me, but inclusion wasn't. And there's a big difference between diversity and inclusion. So you can appear good, right? We've got different colors of skins that we speak to. We've got different, positions or gender identities. But the issue is, do you listen? And I think for a really long time, I didn't listen, right? Oh, we should do a land acknowledgement. Yeah, that'd be really good. Okay, but do you know why you do that? Do you know what an land acknowledgement means? And I didn't. Heather Beaver taught me that. And I think that what's so fascinating about me about speaking to our children about it is I can promise you that I never ever had a conversation about race with my parents. And subsequently, I then do not have that skill set. And there are so many there are so many people who are so good at this that I tell you, when I first had a conversation with our children, which was a year ago, it was like certainly on the heels of George Floyd, Black Lives Matter. Like, I'm so grateful to be in this season of a racial reckoning. As mortified as I am, the more things that sort of unfold, including Dante Wright's death 2 days ago. I think that I'm amazed because, so I spoke with these two ladies named Lanisha Tabb and Naomi O'Brien, both school teachers, primary school teachers in the States. And they developed this program, which is ridiculous, but I bought it like, look, line and sinker. A guide for white parents on how to talk to your children about race. And it is on their website, and they're so beautiful and supportive and open about this process. They're very clear, like, do your own work. You don't need to come to me and ask me how to do it. But I was so grateful that they created this resource. And it was like, it walked us through the questions on, like, how do you define what racism is? How do you define, with a 10-year-old and an 8-year-old, what is the definition of an ally? Have you ever been racist? And we asked them that. Have you ever remembered seeing anything, talking anything? And then they had to ask us that. Daddy, mommy, have you ever said anything that was racist? And we both said, yes, we have. And the look on their faces was like shock and utter disgust at us that we would have spoken that way or thought about that way of people. And they were like, what did you say? And I said, well, mommy I've made fun of the way they talk. I've made fun of names. I never work really hard to say names correctly. I don't understand, when I say accents of people, I was doing that to be funny, not respectful. And that all of those things are rooted in racism and in a belief that, mom and dad don't understand, people who don't look like us. And so they were like, oh my, you guys. And we were like, right. And it was really the first sort of impetus of like, holy shit, like I can't tell them how to be anti-racist. I got to show them. And it was sort of this idea then that, okay, like even about that time, we were like, I need to do better at this. And so we had an Indigenous woman who has become such a dear friend of mine offered to do a blanket exercise for our team, which is a walking through of sort of Canadian Indigenous history that has been developed by Indigenous peoples that really enlighten us white folk on what it looks like in the moment. It's a 2-hour process where they actually go through the history of Canada with blankets, and you're invited to participate as Indigenous people would have, and they become the white people narrating. And you get up and you stand on blankets, and then they snatch them away from your feet, and they take away, they have props like a baby doll and artifacts and all of these things, and they snatch them and they send you to the chairs, and you want to punch them. You feel so protective over your things. And then when they go to take the prop, sometimes you're just like, you can just feel the pain. And there's tears. And I invited my parents to sit in a part of this. And it was like, my father's 70 years old and he is sobbing and apologizing. And he was the one who, so many times we would drive through reserves and be like, don't stop. They're just looking for handouts. there was no appreciation or understanding about the history, certainly of, what does the 60 scoop mean? What does residential school system look like? None of those things. We had access to learning them. I mean, I have a PhD. My husband has a PhD. I had access to learn. This is not about access. This is about ignorance. And I chose not to, right? Because I would have had many opportunities in my life. I just chose not to. And I mean, I lived in Saskatchewan for 6 years. I was at the University of Regina. There was many opportunities to learn that. And I was just like, yeah, well, you know what? Yes, no, I'm diverse in my understandings. It's only recently that I'm understanding the weight of what it means to truly be inclusive.
And I think that when you sit in different circles, and you start to see different perspectives, because we cannot see something that is not through our lens to see if we've not experienced it. So it's hard to even fathom what it would feel like. We can't even.
I mean, I think what's really crazy about this, Laura, is this is what I've learned. We actually can. We just don't want to, which is the definition of privilege. So when we say things like, I can't even, can you imagine somebody coming to the door in 20 minutes from now and taking your children? You can't imagine that. I can imagine that. And I can't imagine what I would do to that person, or what would happen when I would drop to my knees because a police officer would, or a warrant officer would be holding me in the corner, right? As they take my twins out of here, right? I can't imagine that. I just don't want to. And that's the difference, right? That's privilege, because we never had to, and we never will. And even to this day, this happens at people in college all the time, because there's massive differences. The data in our school system is huge, right? Suspension rates on Black and white kids are completely astronomically different, right? That divides statistics and all those things. And so why is that? It's because we've come from multiple generations of colonization that we're not even beginning to undo, because we believe it to our bones. And it doesn't make us bad people. It makes us, it implores us, particularly as white people, to be able to raise the voices and understanding in that regard, right? So I'm so grateful that you would make space for this. And I don't in any way consider myself, I mean, I have so much to learn in this way, but I'm amazed every day about how ignorant I've been, my whole life to this.
And me, and which is why when I sat down to do this, I said, this is a conversation I want to have because it's important to me. And so I really appreciate and thank you for having these hard conversations about that, in the space that you hold. So listen, you have so many exciting things coming up. Tell us, what is next? What's in store for you?
Okay, big things, which I would really love for your mamas to be a part of. We do our Together event May 8th, which is Braver Together. We're gathering women or anybody who identifies as a mother or with a female energy to Together, which is May, the day before Mother's Day. Is a virtual conference. We have Jillian Harris and Fortune Feemster and Savvy Simon and Rachel Milky, your Saskatchewan girl, and Clary Chambers. Chow Louie is going to sit all day with me, and Cheryl Fogo, who is like the most phenomenal historian in Black history that I've ever met. And we are going to just gather and talk about what it means to be braver together. So I would love, listen, if your crew goes to this code and they punch in or goes to the site and they say Jody, they'll get 15% off any ticket. Cause I would love. I don't even I just want everybody in their people to be there because I think it's going to be such a phenomenal day. And then Teachers These Days, which is my second book, comes out with I co-wrote with an author, Lori Mack, who's an amazing teacher. That's going to launch in August at Relit. And then I was talking the other day, I think I'm going to write my third book. I think is going to be about reconnection. And I feel like that's just going to pour out. Like, I feel like that's a fall project that's going to be, it's going to be good.
Well, I'm telling you, I have my VIP ticket already.
Thank you.
To go, and I checked out Fortune Feemster the other night when I was having a nice little relaxing bath. She is fucking hilarious.
Her bits on when she's Brenda in the hot tub in love with Tim, I can't. Her ice cream dances in her pink suit. If you haven't seen her do her pink suit dance with the ice cream, I can't.
No, I watched when she was the token friend who was smacking all the dicks away at the party, right? So that she could, save her friends. It was so funny. Anyway, I am so looking forward to together. I'm going to share it with all my audience. I cannot speak highly enough of the work that you do, and I thank you so much for sharing this space with me and with all the mamas who are following along. Strong as a mother is how we're going to continue to navigate through this, because yin energy, we hold the planet on our shoulders and in our hearts. So thank you so much for joining me.
For having me. Thank you.
I can't wait to see what's ahead, and I am going to be right there following you. So thank you so much, Dr. Jody.
Thank you, Laura.
If you'd like to tune in to more Strong as a Mother series events, please follow me at lauralawrence.ca.